Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. I wanted to switch gears a bit for April, watch something faster paced, with higher stakes, basically something a lot more exciting than what I've been watching these past few months, and I can tell you now that Akudama Drive was everything I was looking for on that front. This series takes place in a post-apocalyptic version of Japan, or it might be a little dramatic to call it an apocalypse, but it is post some kind of civil war that ended with the Kanto region basically bombing the Kansai region out of existence. Our story takes place in the new Kansai, one big futuristic city that Kanto was responsible for rebuilding after the war. As a result, the people of Kansai are raised to believe Kanto is a utopia of sorts, a holy land that only a privileged few are ever allowed to enter. The Shinkansen, this high-tech train whose track encircles the city, is the only way to get there, and it's a common sight to see people literally stop and start to pray whenever it passes by. Like most societies existing in a time after a catastrophic war, Kansai is run by a pretty strict justice system, managed largely by automated police robots, making it difficult to defend yourself and try to argue the nuances of your case. Once you've been assigned some kind of criminal status, you're generally stuck with it. Your personal ID that you have to scan to do pretty much anything in this world marked for everyone to see. Akudama is a term that can be used more generally to describe anyone who's an outcast, but in this show it's pretty interchangeable with the word criminal. This is one of those shows where no one gets a real name, which is the kind of storytelling choice that really sends a message all on its own if you think about it. Characters are labeled based on their job positions mostly, and the group of Akudama who serve as our main characters are all named for their crimes. The story opens on the night Kansai's most notorious serial killer, designated as Cutthroat, is scheduled to be executed. Once you actually meet Cutthroat, it quickly becomes clear that if this was a society with a proper justice system, he would absolutely qualify for some kind of insanity defense. Cutthroat loves killing people, but primarily because he's enamored with anything red. He's plagued with delusions that compel him to kill, and his demeanor is very childlike. On the night of the execution, 4 of the city's other most notorious Akudama all receive messages, and the promise of a lot of money, if they can successfully break into Kansai's justice building and rescue Cutthroat. What was most interesting about these messages is that they were all personalized, presented to each Akudama in a way they wouldn't be able to refuse. The money's enough to sway Doctor, a serial killer with a bit more focus. We mostly see her just taking out anyone who annoys her, but she has a long history of taking people apart more scientifically and experimenting on them, her own body included. I don't want to spoil what really makes her tick, but it was a satisfying surprise to discover that she's not after immortality. She makes it very clear she finds that desire as cliché as I do. Brawler is pretty much everything you'd expect him to be. A musclehead street fighter. Whenever there's a problem, the only solution that ever occurs to Brawler is brute force. To him, this rescue mission is presented as a challenge. Hacker's a young tech genius who breaks into all the city's strongest security systems for fun, easily bored of everything in life. To Hacker, this mission is labeled as a game, and Courier has been handling business deals for criminals since he was a child, ferrying goods and money for gangs and that sort of thing. He takes a lot of pride in his work, specifically that he's never left a job unfinished, so he's paid up front for this mission, ensuring that he can't turn it down. The series primarily follows an ordinary girl who runs into Courier at a takoyaki stand earlier in the night. This girl has a very strong moral compass and tends to act impulsively when she sees a wrong she might be able to fix. And we soon learn that she also hates to leave things unfinished. So when Courier drops a 500 yen coin after paying for his food, of course she rushes to return it to him, but he won't take it back, telling her dropped money is bad luck, And oh, how true that's about to prove to be. The money doesn't belong to her, so the girl won't use it to pay for her food, even once she learns the food stand only takes cash, something almost no one carries on them in this day and age. The old woman running the stand freaks out, assuming she's going to run off without paying, and calls the police bots, who come and take her away. I'm pretty sure her official character name is Ordinary Girl or Ordinary Person, but from here on out we'll refer to her as Swindler, which is the conclusion her police bot judge comes to, and how she introduces herself not long after, when the Akudama attack the building, and she gets caught in the middle of their four-way standoff, trying to save a cat she saw running through the chaos. Swindler manages to mostly convince them that she's such a talented scam artist, she's even managed to trick the government's scanner system, and that's why she has no official record. They also picked up a low-level criminal named Hoodlum while tearing up the jail. Hoodlum is an interesting addition to this tale. He does bring something to this story, and I'm sure he's someone's favorite character. But they could have just as easily told this whole story without him, while only having to tweak a few scenes. The best way I can describe Hoodlum is that he reminded me of Usopp from One Piece. As soon as he realizes the severity of what he's stumbled into, he has the same reaction Swindler does. He panics and tries to bluff his way to the top. Much less believably, I'd say, but Brawler's not the brightest guy around, and is immediately taken in by his flashy stories, ensuring Hoodlum's safety in the group. And Hoodlum quickly takes up the role of talking Brawler off the ledge of some of his crazier plans. So, if he brings anything to this tale, I guess it's that he keeps the harmony in this team. And this group is about to become a ragtag sort of team, because the cat Swindler was chasing turns out to be a robot. As soon as they're all together, their employer reveals that he's been watching through the cat's eyes, and that breaking out Cutthroat was only the first phase of the job. Next, he wants them to steal something out of a vault on the Shinkansen, and they're all shackled with collar bombs for a little extra motivation. The real conflict of this story is that once they do get through the train's crazy security, what they find in the vault isn't some kind of treasure, but a pair of children. The reason Kanto would want these kids delivered to them isn't a mystery for long. The Akudama soon discover that these two are the final products of a lab experiment, and what they were experimenting with was immortality. This is the point where the story starts to diverge into more personal conflicts for each of the characters. And because we primarily follow a girl who still sees herself as just an ordinary person who got caught up with a bunch of criminals on accident, this is one of those shows that really tries to dissect where the line is between good and evil, or rather, at what point does an ordinary person become a bad guy? There's something really interesting about Akudama Drive. As I said before, it's one of those post-apocalyptic worlds where the justice system is too black and white, so a story that examines its flaws is naturally going to be about the gray areas, the nuances to crimes, and the reasons people commit them. So it's interesting to note that all our characters are actually pretty simple. There are one or two personality traits you'll pick out about each of them at the start, and those things define them to the very end. This isn't really disappointing, for reasons I can't get into until we hit the spoiler section. It just turned out to be a different kind of story than I was expecting. I definitely thought it was going to be the type of story where Swindler's eyes are opened over time as she gets closer to the Akudama and realizes they're all much deeper people than she first judged them to be. And that's really not how it plays out. But I was satisfied with the way it all came together. As a result of them all being just a little shallow, there were only a couple characters I found myself really growing fond of, but I do want to say that Swindler was a fantastic main protagonist. I actually touched a little in my Handyman Saito review on how I kind of hate this trend of writing main characters whose defining trait is that they're just boring, normal people. Most of the time it comes across as a lazy way to try and make your character relatable. Swindler is an ordinary person character done right, average enough that she is pretty relatable, but it's not done in a way that compromises giving her an actual personality. As I said at the beginning, the two traits you're most likely to pick out about Swindler are that she's good-hearted and impulsive, the kind of person who can't just stand by if she sees something bad happening around her. With that sort of outline, it's kinda just a matter of time before she crosses that line from ordinary person to hero. Unfortunately for her, the difference between a hero and a criminal can depend on how corrupt your government is. She basically gets in with this group by selling herself as the best scam artist of all time, and narratively speaking, there's just something so satisfying about watching that lie slowly become reality. The best scam of all, in a way. Swindler gets really attached to the kids, and once she hears about all they've already gone through, not even the executioners can stand between her and the chance of giving them a better future. Akudama Drive is fast-paced and, well, the beginning is really fun. It's pretty serious and the stakes are really high by the time you reach the midway point, but I would bet you'll be sucked in by that point. It's a show that loves its cliffhangers. It's also got a unique animation style that really grew on me. Whenever the scenes change, the pieces of the next setting slide together and pop up the way you sometimes get in visual novels, even though this is actually an original work. It just added a really cool kind of texture to the story. Maybe it just flew under my radar, but even trying to avoid spoilers for reviews, I usually have a feel for which anime blow up each season, and I don't remember hearing anyone really talk about this one. It feels like a show that should have gotten bigger than it is, though, so it is my recommendation that you check this one out if you skipped it. But I definitely want to talk about the ending before signing off for this review. I mentioned that it came together well, but it didn't play out the way I'd been expecting it to, and I apologize for being so vague about that, but this is the kind of series where the spoilers are really all or nothing, and we're about to jump off that cliff. So if you're sticking around, you have been warned. To get right to the heart of things, all 6 members of our Akudama team meet some sort of tragic end by the show's conclusion, and I'm not usually into everybody dies types of shows. It's a fine line. I like things to be dark, but I also like a happy ending. But I think it worked really well with this series. For one, seeing the whole picture at the end, the way it all came together, soothed any lingering disappointments I had about the characters being on the simpler side. I was expecting this to be a feel-good friendship story, and it's definitely not that, but it's not actually as fatalistic as it might seem at a first glance either. They do get the kids out of Kansai's grasp, and presumably to safety and a brighter future. When you look for the meaning behind an ending to a series where everyone dies, I think the natural conclusion to arrive at is that the creator is sending the message that there was something wrong with these characters' motivations or their goal, that they didn't get a perfect happy ending because they shouldn't get one for some reason. It's usually a cynical sort of outlook, and I really don't feel that way about Akudama Drive. It actually ends on a very hopeful note, which brings us to the second part of Swindler's character journey. Once she gets past her misconceptions about the Akudama being an inherently bad, heartless species, once she starts to accept that the line between an Akudama and an ordinary person can be a little blurry sometimes, she starts to question what makes someone a criminal, but not in those exact words. What she specifically starts to question, pretty early on, is whether there's anything that's truly worth dying for. She certainly doesn't believe so at first, watching these lunatics who seem ready to throw their lives away for money or the promise of excitement or a challenge. But the kids are the final nail in the coffin of her view of her society. More literally, the final nail in her coffin, as her last act is to distract the executioners so they can escape. And she stages the whole thing really well. The encounter is broadcast live to the rest of the city, and she never once breaks character, calling out to them for help, looking for all the world like an innocent, ordinary person, and knowing full well the chaos and rioting that will ensue once that world sees the executioners cut her down anyway, without hesitation or remorse. As far as character deaths go, Swindler's was a really good one, and still just a little bit of a surprise. Right up until the last moment, I thought she might have some other trick up her sleeve. I didn't quite believe yet that the writers were really going to kill off all of them, but I wasn't disappointed that they did. I said it before, Swindler grows to be pretty heroic. She's a really great character. She found a cause worth fighting and even dying for. Akudama Drive isn't your typical dystopian rebellion story. It gets there by the end, but our hero's goal is much smaller, just happiness for these two abused kids. Having reached the end, the story doesn't feel shallow or incomplete, but focused. It's just one piece of a much bigger tale, but it's a piece that's definitely worth experiencing. Thank you for watching.